Welcome everybody, it's Jay Baer at Convince and Convert, joined today by a very special guest, my good friend Mark W. Schaefer. Mr. Schaefer, how are you, good sir?
I could not be better.
What does that
Any
W
day
stand for anyway?
with Jay Baer, it's like taking a vitamin. I just feel energized.
Or a Valium, depending on your point of view. What does the W stand for in Mark W. Schaefer? Wonderful.
Wannabe.
Which brings us to today's book, The Return on Influence. Now, usually when I wave the book in front of the camera in these interviews, I have the book, but because I was graced with the electronic version of the book, I think I owe you $25. I only have printed out the cover so that you can see what it looks like.
Well, the hard copy book is coming to you. I'm going to be signing some copies next week, and of course you're featured in the book, so I owe a great debt to you for your help.
Well, I think it's quite the contrary, but thank you very much. It is a terrific book. I devoured it. I devoured it recently on an airplane, as I typically do. It was really, really good, and obviously a tricky subject. I mean, there is a reason why nobody in social media has written a book about the nature of influence. Tell us why you decided to tackle this tricky subject.
Well, yeah, the history of the book and how I got there is actually quite interesting and quite dramatic in some ways, because I got really interested in the subject about a year and a half ago, and I noticed that anytime someone wrote a blog post about Klout, there would be this foaming at the mouth. People would be violent in their hate. And one guy said to me on my blog, he said, "Mark, are you with me? We've got to stop this."
And you said, "No, I'm not with you."
And I'm thinking, wow, people don't react this way over PageRank. This is something new.
Right.
And then, Jay, I started hearing about all these companies that were actually using it. And Disney, Audi, Revlon, it's like, these are not schlock companies. And so I got really interested in it. And I thought that this could be a mainstream trend. I mean, of course, now everybody kind of knows about Klout and talks about Klout. But I mean, a year and a half ago, I mean, it was unknown. And really, actually, it's still obscure to most people other than people like you and me. But so I made a proposal to my publisher, McGraw-Hill, and this was the tricky part. I turned in an outline, and I said, I don't know what this book is going to be about.
That's always what they want to see in the proposal process.
And that got their stamp of approval right then and there, baby. And I said, because there is no story. There are no experts. This is completely new. It's developing week by week. I can give you an outline of what I think it's going to be, but I'm going to let the research tell the story. I don't know. I haven't even made up my own mind about the legitimacy of this platform and where it could go. And so I turned to experts like you and to Robert Scoble and the famous acclaimed author Robert Cialdini, the author of Influence at Work. And I did about 70 different interviews, and I also did academic research to figure out how did we get here, and what's the science behind these formulas. We don't know their secret sauce, and we never will, nor should we. It's their secret sauce. But there's enough academic research out there that you can piece it together and have a pretty good idea of what they're doing. So, and that's what I did. And at the end of the day, I think I tried to present a balanced book where, I mean, I really give Klout and the other companies that are now flocking into this space a lot of credit for trying to do what they're trying to do. But I also say there are problems. There are problems with gaming the system. There are a lot of issues, as you know, with privacy. So I address some of those issues head on. But at the end of the day, I do think they're onto something. I think that there is something legitimate here. I think that there is solid science developing here, and that this is a trend we need to pay attention to.
The book is called Return on Influence. One of the questions that people always have about Klout and similar services is how can you possibly deign to measure something as amorphous as influence? How would you, Mark W. Schaefer, define online influence? What is the marker of online influence?
You know, that's difficult. I mean, the first half of the
book... Well, you wrote a book about it. It shouldn't be that difficult.
It's difficult to say in a soundbite. The first half of the book basically explores that question.
Yeah.
It explores that difference. And this was the interesting thing, Jay, because not a lot has really been written about this.
Yeah.
A lot is volumes have been written about how to, be influential and win friends and influence people, and how to be a better car salesman, and how to be a better this and how to be a better that in the carbon-based world. But there hasn't really been a lot written, and I was amazed, Jay, really, at the lack of even research that's been done as far as this idea of influence online. So the first part of the book kind of says, what is different now? And here is a turning point. This was another kind of exciting part about the book where, after I talked to you and many other real experts who have been immersed in this field for so long, I started to see that there were pieces missing from this traditional offline model. And I actually interviewed Robert Cialdini, who wrote the seminal book on this topic. And after about 45 minutes, we had this great talk. And I said, well, Dr. Cialdini, after all that we talked about today and all these interviews that I've done, it seems like there's something missing. There's something different about the online world and influence and what you have historically written about. And there was this pause, and I thought this could go really badly. And he said, you're right. You're right. And he said, "What you're onto something. You're right here. That you've identified that there are differences, and I think you're heading down the right path." So he encouraged me to keep going down that path. So I thought at that point, okay, this is interesting. Robert Cialdini says this is a good idea for a book. It's probably a good idea for a book.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, he's a great intellect and a very kind man.
One of the things that I think people struggle with regard to Klout and online influence is this notion of reciprocity, and we talked about that a little bit for the book.
Yeah, that's right.
That we have very much in our social media bubble sort of this culture of I'll scratch your back and you scratch mine, etc. And Klout, by their own admission, says if you interact with people with higher Klout scores, it will raise your own Klout score, etc. That's part of the algorithm. They've acknowledged that over time. As we talked about in our interview, though, if people are doing things because it has intrinsically it's intrinsically beneficial to themselves, is that truly? Are you really influencing somebody when all they're really trying to do is benefit themselves ultimately?
Yeah, well, that's so interesting. It's such an interesting question, and I really enjoyed exploring that part of the book, because what makes it so fascinating is that what I found out through the academic part of the research was that humans have this insanely deep, innate process to return a favor. We almost can't stand it. When someone does something nice to us or for us, we just have to pay it back. We're almost driven to pay it back. And in the offline world, in the human world, usually that means whenever you do a favor for someone, you've got your skin in the game.
Yeah.
Someone's knocking at your door at midnight saying, "My baby is sick. Can you, do what, help take me to the hospital or something?" And so certainly, a gift, a favor, something that happens at work, a promotion or whatever, you don't forget those things. Here's the interesting part. Even though reciprocity on the social web can be something as small as pushing a like button, that human instinct is still the same. So it's way out of whack. and people have, I mean, and I'm sure you experienced this, and you mentioned this in the book, is that people, maybe you don't even know, they're tweeting you, and maybe they're leaving a comment, and in their mind they're building up this social capital in your bank, and then all of a sudden they ask for a withdrawal.
Yeah.
And you go, what, you know, where'd this come from?
Yeah, yeah, it happens.
But in their mind this is legitimate. It's just like doing, you know, some big favor for you in real life.
Yeah.
So there is this disconnect, and that is a big difference between influence in the online world and the offline world.
I mean, one of the premises of online influence and Klout and things of that nature is your ability to move larger than average numbers of people to act in some way. But yet, as our friend Jason Falls talked about in the book, I thought it was really interesting. In many cases, success on the social web isn't so much about breadth and broadcasting, but about narrowcasting. As he says, look, he only needs a few clients at a time. He only needs a few people to read his blog, a few people to sign up for his monthly advice service, etc., for this to be successful. So to some degree, we're being encouraged to build these big networks, but maybe we really just need a smaller network that really and truly cares about what we do. I mean, you look at the community.
I thought that was a really interesting contrast. Yeah. I used the example of my friend in the book who really built a career because he was so likable. And it got to a point where he kept getting promoted, and it got to the point where we were saying, is this guy really smart? Or is he just, you know, so likable? But in that situation, he has zero room for error. If you build your career on likability in the offline world, you know, you can't have any enemies. You've got to you've got to really drive that. As Jason said, in the numbers are so big in the online world, you can afford to not necessarily be liked by everyone. You just, as I think he said, I just have to be liked by 6 marketing directors in the world. That's basically will make my career very nice. So it's another very fascinating difference to explore.
Yeah, although if you look at it, I feel like there are people in our world who are inherently more likable or believed to be so, or that's the public persona that they project. And it certainly helps that they have the chops to back it up. I look at somebody like Ginny Dietrich, who is, by all accounts, highly likable, and everybody wants to be around Ginny, but she also knows what she's doing, which doesn't hurt. But the combination of the two was really powerful. Brogan's the same way, very likable guy, much more so than most people would expect. Falls the same way, and so it's interesting when you get it coming from both directions. I think it's sort of a 1 + 1 = 3 circumstance.
Well, absolutely. I think in many ways, the social web really amplifies personality.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you're a jerk, people are going to sniff you out. You're not going to be able to fake it very long.
Yeah, you can still be a jerk. You can still be a jerk 140 characters at a time, right?
That's right.
It comes through.
And I mean, some of the people that you mentioned, I think I've met. Well, I haven't met Ginny yet. I'm going to meet her at Social Slam.
Oh, is she coming to Social Slam too? Social Slam, April 27th. Knoxville, Tennessee, run by the man Mark W. Schaefer.
What an amazing!
Mitch will be there. It's going to be incredible.
I mean, I can't. The lineup: Ginny is a keynote speaker. Mitch Joel, Tom Webster, Jay's going to be there. Marcus Sheridan, Stanford Smith from Pushing Social.
Awesome guy, yeah.
Stephanie Wonderland, the sales lion, Marcus Sheridan, and Sean McGinnis. Sam Fiorella, I mean, too many to even note. It's just an amazing lineup. And I was talking to, I've been helping with the content, but the local social media club is really driving the thing. And they called me yesterday. They said, here's the big question mark. How in the world are you going to beat this lineup next year?
You're not. It's going to be a 2-year deal.
Amazing firepower in one room for an $89 ticket. It's an amazing, amazing day.
It's going to be fun.
Yeah. So how do we get on that? We're talking about nice people.
Yeah.
Like Ginny. Yeah, and I think I've met a lot of these people. I've met Chris, and I mean they're very likable people. You can't fake that. They are very warm, nice people, and that comes across on the web. And you're right, that helps a lot.
It's interesting though. sort of looking at it from the other perspective, something that a lot of people kvetch about. They may not talk about it publicly as much, but this notion that, just because you have online influence doesn't necessarily mean that qualifies you to be a consultant or an advisor to corporations. It's the whole, just because you can write a blog that's successful doesn't mean that you should be in the blog advice business. And I think Klout feeds into that mentality a little bit. People say, well, I have a Klout score of 67, therefore I must be a social media consultant. I must be worthy of your time and attention. That, I think, is a little dangerous.
It is dangerous. It really is dangerous. And I think a lot of people draw similarities between a Klout score and a credit score. And a credit score, it's not even an indication of your integrity. It's not an indication of your ability or your willingness to pay off a bill, but it's an indication of something. And as long as you know that it's very limited and what it's an indication of, you're going to be okay. But if you start using credit scores to make assumptions about people beyond this narrow little sliver of what it's supposed to represent, it's wrong. And there is and I talk about this in the book. Again, I'm concerned about some of the human aspects of what could hapen as these scores go mainstream, and that's one of them. It's going to create this almost like a caste system of haves and have-nots. And I think people will abuse this because of the density of information on the social web. People are hungry for shortcuts.
Yep.
They want to know in 140 characters, what do I do and who do I trust? And I guarantee you, Jay, that more people know how many Twitter followers I have than what I've done in my career or what I do for my family or what I do for my community. Which are all more important than the number of Twitter followers I have. And yet people are judging me this way. They may even be hiring me this way. So it is an indicator of something, but it can certainly become bastardized.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard tales. I've not experienced it personally, but I've heard tales of people putting their Klout score prominently on their resume and people being hired or not hired for social media positions based on at least to some degree Klout score, things like that. I think that's a little bit of a misapplication of the data. But there are good examples of companies using Klout for promotional purposes or influencer outreach. What are some of the examples or case studies that you think are interesting?
Well, I think I've got at least 15 case studies in the book. And to be honest with you, I think it's the highlight of the book. I think because these are case studies that have never been seen before, and it kind of lifts the veil of this mystery of what do brands actually do with these things.
Yeah. And
what I love about that chapter is the creativity, is that you look at the one example from Burson Marsteller, a large PR firm based in New York, but they're global. I think they have 80 offices or something like that. How they're using Klout scores in crisis management. So if something breaks bad news for one of their customers, they're actually looking at what are the Klout scores of the people who are trying to share this information, and they're making decisions they can predict. Is this thing going to move or is it not going to move based on the Klout score? I actually think that's a good use of the scores, because I think Klout scores are an indicator of how well people can move content through a network and beyond a network. I think that is what is the small sliver of what's being measured here, and increasingly well.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
It's a smart way of using the scores.
Yep.
But I mean, I think the book is really going to open people's eyes to some of the amazing things that are driving bottom line results.
Yeah.
And another kind of stunning fact is I think the number is like 80% of the companies who are using these Klout programs are coming back for more. It's working. And another, I think, symptom, which I didn't get into the book, was the number of companies who would not talk to me. And why would they? I mean, because it's working. And if someone came to me and said, we want to know all your secrets about how you're having success with your customers, I'd say, go away.
Yeah, yeah.
But I was lucky that, I mean, I got to interview probably the #1 guy in the world that has done these integrated Klout influencer programs with traditional brands. He couldn't name a lot of the big brands in the book, obviously, for proprietary reasons, but he was able to, take us behind the curtain to look at how these scores are really being used, and some benefits that were really amazing to me, some very clever ideas, even like research, how they're using Klout programs to get feedback on their products, which was very enlightening.
Yeah, one of the things that I think mentioned in the book, and I've heard people from Klout talk about it in presentations, is that on average, somebody who is tapped to participate in a Klout Perk kind of program creates on average 30 pieces of content about whatever business that they interact with. So between Instagram photos and tweets and Facebook status updates and LinkedIn posts and blog posts, etc., I mean, it almost doesn't matter as much the amplification of that person. If you could say, look, here's what we're going to do. If you pay this company some money, we're going to find some people, regardless of influence, and each of them are going to create on average 30 pieces of content about your brand. That in and of itself has value. That force amplification opportunity is pretty interesting.
It's measurable, and you can compare that type of impression in some ways to traditional advertising impressions. Sure. But here's the power that a lot of people aren't really understanding, that this is the power of someone creating these impressions. Let's say about a new Subway sandwich. While they're sitting in the store eating the sandwich, they're taking pictures and they're tweeting and they're talking about this. These are people who love your product, advocating your product, where it's being used. This is entirely new. I mean, really, it's a new marketing channel. This couldn't have happened 2 or 3 years ago. You needed to have this widespread adoption. You had to have widespread access to the high-speed internet and widespread adoption of these publishing tools for this to even be possible.
Yeah.
Now the layer on top of this is the algorithm figuring out who's creating buzz, and that is revolutionary. This whole process of creating an influence score, like an E score or a Q score, used to be, this is like behind the curtain, secret stuff. What's Tom Hanks' E score? What's George Clooney's Q score?
Yep.
Now everybody has an influence score.
Yeah. And
brands are tapping in and finding these people, and it's a new marketing channel.
One of the things I think is really interesting, especially for the enterprise, is to measure internal influence, right? So who is influential within the company so that they can have teams coalesce around them or communicate more effectively with coworkers or answer more questions in terms of knowledge transfer. I really like that idea.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That was one of my ideas.
Of course, yes, I know. That's why I brought it up. It was in the book.
Oh, thank you. Flattery will get you everywhere, Jay. It's a little scary too, because now you can be, you just can't tell somebody that you're being successful at an account or that you're influential at an account. Why couldn't you apply these same measures in an internal environment? And here's the thing, is that very rapidly these online conversations are being connected to offline behaviors. Look at the Facebook timeline and what Facebook is trying to do there. Document every step of your life, and many people are willing to do that. So increasingly, you're going to be able to say, Jay Baer writes about a new restaurant or a new record album, and people are going to be putting on their timeline, well, this person is connected to Jay. He's influenced by Jay. And every time Jay writes about Radiohead, Mark Schaefer goes out and buys this album, and those dots are being connected. In short order, you'll be able to do that in many aspects of our life, and use it as an internal gauge. There's no reason that couldn't happen, and I think it will.
Yeah, and we've talked about this in the past, and we've each written about it. I mean, Klout itself has some weaknesses, and they're trying to quantify something that's very difficult to quantify. There's other companies in this space, Peer Index, Peak Analytics, etc. They're all trying to do, opinions. People trying to do virtually the same thing. It's a tough nut to crack, but I think we both agree that this concept of influence measuring is here to stay, because it's so valuable to businesses in this sea of information where every customer is a reporter. To be able to say, okay, well, if every customer is a reporter and all these people are communicating about and to us, within that field, which of these people sort of have a larger audience? I think that clearly is something that companies are going to gravitate toward and build into their day-to-day operations.
Yeah, and I think that wisdom is being cloaked by emotion.
Yeah.
Because Klout has, I mean, it's a difficult situation because they're innovating and iterating in public, and you've built companies, all right? I've built products, I've built companies, and worked for big companies, and sometimes it's like making sausage.
Yeah.
It is ugly. You make mistakes. Hopefully, at the end of the day, you're going to have a beautiful, tasty product. But Klout has made some missteps. I mean, if it was a typical company, a normal company, we wouldn't even know about it.
Right.
But they're iterating in public, and they've created a lot of controversy for themselves. They've made some of the mistakes were based on some of the judgments they made. Some of them, they were just it was the situation. But nevertheless, it's created a lot of emotion that I think has cloaked this fact that they are onto something, that this idea about measuring this content and how people react to it, it is an indicator of something. It's an indicator of how people can create buzz. And that is golden for a lot of businesses and brands. And it's not perfect, but it's getting better. And even now, it's in the silent movie stages of its development, and it's good enough for lots of big brands to be using this. So, I mean, I think as a business professional, you've got to understand this. Let's get through the emotion. And yes, there are problems, and yes, there are things that are wrong. But we've got to look at the facts, and we've got to look at the very real business opportunities and look at how businesses are using this and driving action to their bottom line.
Well, certainly something that will help people cut through the emotion and understand the facts is the new book, Return on Influence.
We'll do it in stereo.
There you go. Look at that.
We're gonna attack them on both sides.
Fantastic. It looks good. The book looks good.
Well, I think one compelling reason to buy this book, Jay, is because it's yellow. And I think why wouldn't you buy a book that would look so cheery and yellow? And I think it is fun to read. I mean, I talk a lot about
it's not dry at all. It's very
the
fun
academic stuff, but I mean it's kind of fun and conversational, and there's funny parts in there, and I think you'll laugh, you'll cry,
It's better than Cats. We'll read it again and again. It's funny, about the yellow book.
I don't know if that's a compliment or not.
It's funny about the yellow book. Last time I talked to my publisher, same thing. They said, we've done market research. We've determined that yellow is the new trend for books.
Is it really?
Yeah, that's what they told me. Literally, that's what I was told. So there you go. Nicely
Well, the
done.
first time I saw it, I hated it. Because I'm kind of a blue kind of guy.
It'll pop off the shelf, though.
I'm kind of a now revolution kind of guy. So I saw the book, and I didn't really like it, but I thought, you know what? I'm not the expert here. This is a time to defer to the people who are doing this research. So yellow it is.
It will pop off the shelf. Available next week-ish, right?
It's available now online. It should be in bookstores in the next week or so.
Okay, so when this runs, it should be available in bookstores. Thanks very much for being here. Always great to spend some time with you.
A delight, Jay.
And I'll see you in a couple weeks.
Yep, thanks.
All right, thanks a lot.